After a hunting trip to the Rocky Creek Valley, four friends came home in an unsettling state, somewhat disturbed. Though the men insisted they weren't drinking, nobody believed that. In the next few days, all four men got a really strange delivery from the Vance family funeral home. A brand new coffin. Is this supposed to be some kind of sick joke? In their mid-40s, the men were at a stage where thoughts of wills, estate planning, and routine medical checkups would typically dominate their minds. But coffins, that seemed way over the line. Amanda's husband's coffin was the first to arrive. Late Saturday afternoon, the delivery truck backed onto their street with a steady beeping that startled the birds into flight. Two men swung open the truck's rear doors and carefully wheeled a wooden crate onto a dolly. Eagerly, Amanda's husband prepared for their arrival, shoving furniture out of the way to clear a path through the hallway, ensuring the men could carry the coffin seamlessly into the basement rec room. It was strange, just like that scene in A Christmas Story where the dad unwraps the lamp, Amanda remarked. Jim was practically jumping up and down to tear open the crate and create a mess. He looked like a kid, thrilled to receive his coffin? Mia's husband was next to receive his coffin. The other men gathered around, eager to admire it. The wood gleamed with the rich hue of a ripe coconut shell. The three other men were drawn to the coffin like moths to a flame, wanting to caress the cool surface, imagining it smooth beneath their palms, akin to the feel of their freshly shaven cheeks. Laura's husband was the only one who didn't have his coffin inside the house. His arrived last, and fed up with how the other wives had bent to the men's whims, Laura stood firm, declaring that the coffin would not cross the threshold of their home. "Are you out of your mind?" she challenged her husband. So his coffin found a resting place in the garage. Eventually, all four men finally got their coffins. They displayed them proudly. Whether in the basement, the living room, or the now-defunct guest bedroom, which had lost its purpose when the bed was removed to accommodate the coffin. One night, just after midnight, Amanda's husband slipped out of bed and made his way to the basement to check on his coffin. He scrutinized the lid and sides, ensuring there were no unsightly fingerprints marring its surface. His CD collection and stereo system were housed in the basement. Amanda's husband hadn't touched them in years, not since Amanda made all their devices capable of streaming music. The stereo was the same one from his first apartment over 20 years ago. He picked a CD from the row of jewel cases he once spent hours keeping in immaculate alphabetical order. He was pleased when he flipped to the track list on the back, and one of the titles screamed out, "Yes, this is the song to listen to in this moment." He pressed play. Amanda's husband stepped out of his slippers, then bounded onto his coffin with surprising agility. The familiar tune reached Amanda's ears. Initially mistaking it for a passing car, she soon noticed the empty space beside her in bed and rose to investigate. In the basement, she found her husband cranked up to full volume. He danced on top of the coffin, his bare feet slapping against the polished wood in a series of rhythmic spatters. "What on earth are you doing?" He twirled around, hands flailing in the air, his legs dancing with reckless speed. A wide grin spread across his face as he reveled in the sheer joy of the moment, dancing without a care atop his new coffin. Around the neighborhood, a similar scene repeated itself in the living room, spare bedroom, and garage of the other three coffin men. In bare feet, under the spell of songs they loved, they danced atop their coffins. "It wasn't like wedding dancing, not even drunk wedding dancing," Amanda said. "He really put his heart into it. It's like he was dancing to express joy or gratitude." She took a drag of her cigarette. "It's getting weird." Janet, the fourth wife, nodded. "If he starts sleeping in it, we're looking at a divorce." In March, a heavy rainstorm on top of the melting snow caused terrible flooding. Amanda's basement was ruined. The rising water submerged everything. The coffin was destroyed. The wooden surface her husband had been so proud and protective of was now white with water stains. It looked like a chocolate bar that had been forgotten at the back of the pantry. As Amanda drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms that evening, she remembered him whispering, 18 months. That was good, better than most people get. The car accident happened 4 days later. Amanda's husband had been driving along Glen Ridge when a woman coming off the highway pulled an illegal U-turn into the opposite lane and T-boned his car. There was no new coffin for the funeral. Amanda had her husband cremated. The night of the funeral, even though they were off schedule, the other women's husbands danced on their coffins. They danced longer than usual, listening to song after song. When the music came to an end, they continued to dance in the silence, the only sound the slap of their bare feet against the smooth coffin lid, slippery with the droplets of their sweat and tears. Mia's husband lost his coffin a few years later. It was destroyed by a constructor during a big house renovation. At first, Mia's husband went into a panic. He called the construction company over and over, reaching only a recorded message, a sure sign that a terrible mistake had been made, for which no one wanted to admit fault. He calmed down eventually. He leaned over to kiss Mia's forehead. About 4.5 years. That's good. Better than most people get. A week later, his body went back to Vance's family funeral for burial. He passed from heart failure in his sleep. Janet split with her husband once the last child entered college. His lifelong diabetes caught up with him, probably from a number of factors, including the change in diet, no longer having Janet to remind him to take his injections. He lost his right foot, leaving him on crutches and making dancing an impossibility. He was found by the mailman, having lapsed into a coma some days earlier. Just a man on the floor of a sparse apartment containing little more than a coffin with a lid clean of any recent footprints. Years went by, and in their garage, Laura's husband had placed a wooden box on the floor to give himself a step up onto the coffin. He was too old now to simply jump on it. It became part of Laura's routine to get up once a month and follow her husband to the garage when the coffin called out for him to come dancing. He was nearly 100 years old when he simply couldn't go on anymore. "What was it about?" Laura finally inquired. "Some sort of fairy tale where the 4 of you met the devil in the woods, and he guaranteed you good health as long as you danced on your coffin once a month." She laughed as if teasing, but her husband recognized the seriousness beneath her light-hearted tone. He agreed with a nod. "Sure. If that's what you want to think, feel free to believe it." He took Laura in his arms and said calmly, 50 years is good. That's more than most people get.